Hi, everybody. This is Marlene with Miami Ghost Chronicles Stories of the Supernatural. And I hope you enjoy this new show, whether you're viewing it on the internet or listening to a podcast version of the episode. I do want to thank you for being part of my audience. You can also find links to videos or podcasts on miamighostchronicles.com, as well as where you can submit your story about any eerie experiences you've had, which I would love to hear about. Just go to the Submit Your Story tab. Please subscribe to our channel so that you receive notification of when we release a new show. And find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. This is where I usually live stream and where I give you a behind the scenes look at locations where new episodes are being filmed at. I also tell you about all the interesting guests that will be appearing soon on Stories of the Supernatural. I hope you enjoy the show, and I think you are all wonderful. Hi everybody, it's Marlene with Miami Ghost Chronicles, Stories of the Supernatural. How is everybody doing? Good, I hope. I'm doing good. I know you're not going to see or hear the show for a little bit, but we've gone into autumn. As a matter of fact, this is the first few days of October, which is my favorite holiday, Halloween. Yes. Unusual, right? Probably, if anybody took a guess, they would know that that's one of my favorite holidays. But really, this is my favorite season. Not that it's much of a season here in South Florida, because it's just a little bit less hot, kind of, and we get rid of our rainy season, kind of. But still, anyway, it is my favorite season, and of course, this is the home stretch of the year. We go from Halloween, then we got Thanksgiving, and before you know it, we got Christmas, holidays, New Year's, etc., etc. And believe it or not, we're going to be into 2019. It is incredible how fast time flies. And before, remember when I was a kid, you would say a year, and a year was like forever. And that doesn't hold true anymore. But anyway, let me tell you about the guest that I have today. Super excited about this guest. Very interesting gentleman. His name is James Keenan. Let me tell you a little bit about him. He was born in LA, in California. He grew up drifting through the west coast and southwest of the United States. He graduated high school in El Paso, Texas, and later earned his BA in interdisciplinary studies from the University of California, with his major focus being in anthropology and archaeology. He's had multiple careers that include law enforcement. He's also traveled the world in order to document strange or out-of-place historical anomalies. He's the author of Dark Shadows and Catastrophe, Blue Blood on the Border, and 10/22/2036, and a continuation of Dark Shadows and Catastrophe. And later on, we're going to ask James about these books, because I was reading the plot line about they sound all so super interesting. But before we get to that, we are going to welcome him and of course ask him what we ask everybody: how was it, if they even had a first encounter with the supernatural? So how are you doing today, James?
Oh, I'm doing well. Thank you, Marlene, for having me.
Absolutely, my pleasure, my pleasure. So, as you could tell, did you ever have any type of encounter, brush with the supernatural, even if at the moment you didn't recognize it for what it was in childhood or at all?
I did. As a matter of fact, when I initially had started writing Dark Shadows and Catastrophe, and just unfortunately, due to the careers that I had, which were in law enforcement, I felt that if I had done the autobiography and told people about what had happened to me,
Okay.
it was similar. So I ended up adding a little bit of storyline to basically what was my life.
So this is like a disguised biography, is what you're saying?
It is, yes, very much so. When I was about a year and a half old, I drowned, and I was 5 to 10 minutes underwater It took quite a while for them to resuscitate me.
How
I
long
was
were you underwater?
uh, I was in the pool for about 5 to 10 minutes
Oh
before they
my
found me.
God.
Totally non-responsive. Fortunately, somebody there was able to conduct CPR until the paramedics got there, and fortunately resuscitated me.
Okay.
But right from that get-go, from that near-death experience, I crossed over to the other side.
Okay.
And in Dark Shadows and Catastrophe, the main character, I just changed from that point. I was in a different place. What I tell people is the senses were different. I didn't use sight, so I guess everything was very dark, but I don't think sight was being used. It was more of, and I'm not really sure how to explain it, just different senses that we don't use now, but I could feel, I could see, not see, but I could feel and sense, more or less, all types of presences around me, beings. I was able to travel or just be everywhere, or all different types of places. But again, it wasn't just this feeling and this sense of having access to everything. And then I was brought back. And when I was brought back, what was really interesting was, even though I was a year and a half, absolutely everything in my life from the moment, from the experience while I was gone, and then everything from that point on, I have very good recollection of what a 1.5-year-old did all that time as well.
Right, exactly. Because I was going to ask you, because, were you able to remember, considering your age, what you felt or thought, that experience? You remembered it afterwards?
Absolutely everything. Like I said, it's still difficult to explain to people, because I say all this darkness, you didn't see light, but there was no vision. It was more of just togetherness with absolutely everything and everywhere at one time.
Right. And I understand what you're saying, because we always think of things being either light or dark because of if we're looking through our eyes. You're able to distinguish, in other words, that we're in our physical body and we're using our eyesight. But from what you're describing, it's almost like you were outside of the confines of a body or eyes. So I see what you're saying, whether to determine whether something's light or dark. And let me ask you, did you change it, especially, let's say, from the perspective of your parents? Did you change at all your behavior as a little kid after that?
They said that I acted like a little adult at that point. I picked up on language. I could read and write at a very young age.
Wow.
I understood concepts that shouldn't have been understood until later on in life. Better than what a toddler's would have been. And my memory, I absolutely remember just everything, like where I lived when I was 3-4 years old. I returned when I was in my 20s and drove right to the house where I was at with no problem.
Wow.
I didn't even need, a Thomas guide or anything back in the time that I had gone.
And James, let me ask you, when you came, I know you were a child, and did you feel good after that experience? Because so many people have those near-death experiences. Most have very positive things, and as a matter of fact, it changes them in a positive direction. You've got a few that kind of like detail something very dark, but in this case, you were so young. How did you feel when you came back? Or did you ever have a moment where, like some people describe, that you didn't want to come back?
And that's exactly it. I was completely at peace. It was like I could have ever been, and I didn't want to come back.
Wow.
But obviously, I woke up in the back of the ambulance, and and happy to see my parents. And I don't think I let go of my mother for several hours.
I bet she didn't let go of you for several days.
Yeah, and I remember the doctor in the ER telling them that I was going to have issues.
Yeah.
I was going to have mental capacity issues
Right,
and
because
not
of
be
what?
able
That
to.
they thought that you had suffered like lack of oxygen to your brain?
Exactly.
Wow.
And yeah, and what was weird was point I started seeing like black wavy portals. Not like portals what other people explain or say that when they see a portal. It was almost like a thick liquid that was alive, not in any type of oval shape or circular shape, just
Right.
just portals forming. And then after about a couple weeks, it went away. It stopped.
Okay.
And
Wow. That is intense. Do you think that what you were seeing are portals that are there all the time that we just don't see? And then, of course, like you said, maybe after a few weeks, it wasn't that they weren't there, it's just that you couldn't see them anymore?
and that's exactly because later on I do see them quite a bit, even to this day.
Oh, okay. Right, yeah, because...
But it was like a lost, maybe I didn't start seeing them again until I was 4 or 5 years old. So there was 2.5, 3 years until that, and having other negative paranormal experiences.
Wow. And because, see, I'm thinking now, you probably were a magnet for anything supernatural, paranormal. I'm thinking he probably didn't even have to move into a haunted house. It's like wherever he went, there it goes. What happened as a child? When was it? What were, besides seeing the portals, what was the next thing that happened to you?
Well, sure. Like you said, my book was called Dark Shadows and Catastrophe, and
Right.
obviously that name because what I ended up seeing was a shadow figure. We had moved from Hollywood, California, to La Habra, California, which is out in Orange County, and I was 4 years old. And I moved to this new house. Nothing had happened after the portals for a couple weeks. And once we moved into this house, everything was fine for probably about a month. And then one night, my room was towards the end, and my parents' room was at the very end of the hall. And it was pretty dark inside the room. There was just a single, window next to my bed, and I had a night light. And one night, about a month into it, I was laying there having trouble going to sleep, and there were a bunch of Hot Wheel cars and marbles up on a bookcase.
Okay.
I always put the marbles, I have a little bit of OCD, so I always put the marbles and then surrounded it with the Hot Wheels. And there was just no way for, the marbles to come unless something like that.
Okay.
But there was none. And all of a sudden, the marbles started falling to the ground, and then the Hot Wheels. And it kind of freaked me out.
I bet.
And, I started screaming.
Because I can imagine your room is quiet and you're trying to sleep, and it's like those little noises, they seem magnified, imagine, to a kid that's in his room by himself trying to sleep.
Oh, definitely. And for the next couple of nights, just things looked like they were moving, toys. And I would, I couldn't sleep. And then my parents, I would, start screaming wherever they'd come in and wait until I fell asleep finally. But probably about 3 or 4 days, the marbles and the Hot Wheels fell. I rarely would allow my walk-in closet door to be left open.
Oh.
And it wasn't completely shut, but it had been, closed but not pushed in completely.
Uh-huh.
And that night, the door started opening on its own.
Holy
And
crap.
yeah, like a 4-foot tall shadow figure came flying out of it.
Oh.
I could never see a face on it, but you could still kind of make out. It was wavy,
Okay.
dark, super dark, almost like what the portals looked like to me, that dark, wavy blackness.
Right.
It had arms but no legs, and it had a hat on, but
Really?
not a top hat or what people say. It more,
Right.
it looked more like, and I know this is strange, but like what the hat Peter Pan had.
Okay, yeah, I know what you're talking about. Like one of those Robin Hood hats, kind of,
Right, like a Robin Hood, like a hunter's cap, exactly.
Right.
And
holy crap.
yeah,
And do you think that it was because, I'm fascinated because you're saying it's 4 foot tall, and usually, a lot of people say these shadow people they're like on the tall side. Do you think he was short because he didn't have legs, or it's just that no legs were visible? I don't know which is worse, the tall ones or the short one that you're describing. It's like,
it looked like a dark shadowed human, except for like the back end of the legs and feet. It never had that.
oh my God.
But the rest of the body was complete. And it would move, it would fly around, hide under the bed, move things around. It never spoke, never said anything. And for the next few days, it terrified me.
How did you? For a kid, that must have been. How did you sleep? I wouldn't have been. I wouldn't have stayed in that room. My parents would have had to.
I couldn't move. I couldn't scream. I felt like something was on top of my chest.
What?
I was frozen in the bed. I was paralyzed. No matter how much I tried to move, it just felt like an anvil or a huge rock had been put on my chest. And all I could do was watch this thing torture and torment me. And I couldn't do anything about it.
And it was at the beginning, it was just confined to your bedroom at night?
Correct.
Oh.
And then later on, it started becoming physical, where it would physically come in contact with me and cause lesions. One time it lifted me up and dropped me. And this went on for a long time, and no matter what I told my parents, they just thought, that I was a kid and I was, imagining this.
What I was about to ask you is, it sounds like at no time your parents had no experience whatsoever with this thing.
At that time,
correct. At that time, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And initially it was a room, but as time went on, it would attack me in the bathroom. I was trying to get from, the dark hall out to the living room or to the kitchen. And this happened for a long, and there were points to where I would just be a wreck and screaming and crying when it was bedtime. My parents had to stay with me.
Would it appear, let's say, and I know you said that you had a night light, if you had a light, like a regular lamp, would it still appear? Or did it have to be dim or almost dark?
No, because like in the bathroom and all that, it started coming at me in the afternoon. The house was dark. There wasn't a lot of natural light, not many windows, but still it was light enough, and it still would attack me.
Okay, so
It,
this was not something.
what
Marlene's thinking of the vampire thing. Is like, it can't come in the light, right?
Yeah, no,
Oh my
no.
god. Oh,
It didn't even care later on about the night light. It still would show up, and it would many times what it would do was it would take my covers and slam them around me and like crush me with the covers. It was like pulling on all sides until
uh-huh.
I could barely breathe, and sometimes I'd pass out because there wasn't enough oxygen.
How did you survive this? I'm,
It it was horrifying, and it lasted for years. And what happened was my parents ended up having another. I had a little sister, and I
okay.
got moved down to the first room at the beginning of the hallway because they were going to put that room closest to their room.
Okay.
And she had been there probably for about a month or two from the hospital in the house, and they had not yet put her in that room. They still had her in one of those small little
Right, a little bassinet.
cribs
Yeah.
in their room.
Uh-huh.
And one night in the new room, this thing just started toying with me, and it seemed like it always wanted to communicate that it couldn't. And the more I couldn't understand it, the more and ticked off it would get, and that's when it would get worse and worse in a physical sense with me.
Okay.
But one day, it even though you couldn't see its face, it came right up in my face horizontally while I was in the bed,
Oh.
just like an inch away, and it seemed to grin, and then it flew out the hall, went right down. I followed it. I jumped up because it had never done that before, and it went right into my parents' room, and I started hearing screaming, and was yelling, and you could just hear stuff shaking, and I was freaking out. I ran as fast as I could, and my mom was screaming. It wasn't what I saw. I saw that same fourth. And I used to call it my dark pan or an evil pan because that's what it looked
Evil
like
pan.
to me.
Holy crap. That's pretty, yeah, that's pretty sinister, but that sounds pretty accurate too.
Yeah, and what was happening was my father was on the bed. He couldn't get out, and the bed was up and down several feet off the ground. And my father was just being bounced, and he couldn't get off because this on top of him. And my mom was screaming. And I don't remember exactly what she said to it. It stopped the shaking, looked at her, turned around, looked at me, and then flew right through the wall out into the backyard, or where the backyard would have been.
Okay.
And my parents at that point, they lost it. They were crying. They were like, I can't believe all this. We
Wow.
thought that you were, they thought something was wrong
They
with
must
me.
have felt so bad.
Yeah, and they finally had, a run-in with what I had been going through. But the next day they said that all they saw was like this huge black mass, and my mom said it looked like a big black bear attacking my father. But that's not what I saw. I saw my pan attacking them.
Right.
So I don't know. I guess to see its form, its true form, and they were able to see its energy, or
Right. Yeah, like a modified
that,
version.
right. And I came to that understanding obviously later on in life, not right at that point. So,
James, your
but
parents, I imagine, talk about a coming to Jesus moment. They must have been, and just out of curiosity, neither one of them had run across something like this, when they were younger.
nothing that they had ever told me, and I asked
Okay.
them later in life, and they were absolutely not. And it was the only time they ever had a run-in with this thing.
And by this time, and I know you were a kid, obviously, Did you ever get a sense, was this something that was non-human, or was this a very dark human spirit, or you just did at that point didn't care? You know, it's just like a bad
You
thing.
know, yeah. At that age, I didn't really. It never really came into my mind to think,
Yeah,
what it
like
was.
who
I thought it
cares?
was
It's
just,
horrible.
yeah, it was this thing that I called it my evil pan. That's what I thought it was at that time.
And do you think that this was something that came back with you, or was it something because that was part of that house where your family moved to?
Well, it, see, and we moved from La Habra to Tustin, and nothing happened at that house.
Okay.
So I thought that it was due to the house. It was a new house. Who knows what was there before.
Okay.
But so it had gone away. Unfortunately, then we moved to Paradise Valley, Arizona when I was 7 or 8.
Okay.
And it was a rainy day, and we'd been there probably for about 6, 7, 8 months. And my sister and I were playing in a spare bedroom that was being used as storage. My parents had put all the Mayflower boxes into that room.
Okay.
We'd go play tag in there, running around on top of the boxes. And my mom would always yell that, because we'd get in trouble. We weren't supposed to be doing
Of
that.
course.
It was pouring outside. It was dark, and I'm chasing my sister on top of the boxes. Flying out of the box, grabbed me from the head and pulled me inside of the box and
Oh
closed
my God.
the box. And my sister, she doesn't remember. She was, I think, 2.5, maybe 3 years old. And she went running out to my mom, and by the time my mom got in there, I was still trying to get out of the box, and I couldn't. And then when she started trying to get over, then it let go or whatever. She didn't see anything on top. And that was the last time that I saw that dark shadow figure until I was 15 years old. And when I was 15 was the last time I had a run-in with that. When I'd seen it a couple times in our house, but it never did anything. And by that time, when I was 15, I had quit being afraid of it. I was more angry, and
I can imagine by now you must have been desensitized. It's like, hey, yeah.
exactly. I almost wanted to get even with it at that point.
Yeah.
And when I was on a waterbed in my room, and the bed started shaking so violently that it threw me out of the bed.
And that's the
and I
hard thing
landed.
to do with a waterbed. For those people who don't know what they're like, those waterbeds
Yeah.
weigh a ton.
And I landed on my stomach, and it pushed me down into the floor, into the carpeting, to the point where I could barely breathe. I think losing consciousness, and at that point I fought back for the first time, and it let go, and I never saw it again.
Wow.
But
Interesting.
when we moved from Paradise Valley, we moved to Littleton, Colorado. I went from 8 to 9 years old at that time. And one day my parents had left something down in the basement, and oh my gosh, that's the worst thing
Let me tell you something. The creepiest, most disturbing stories and encounters I've ever had always take place in the basement. I don't know what's going on with that. But anyway, go ahead. So it's like, lucky
we never had a
you.
basement, yeah. Because, in Arizona and California, they're rare. And so I had to go down there, and it was just horrific to have to go from, this first floor down to the basement. I got to the basement. the lights, I turned on the lights. I went down the stairs. When I got to the bottom of the stairs, the lights went out.
Oh my God. I'm sorry. I'm laughing, but they, I, oh my God. Okay, keep going because,
I was horrified, but
yeah,
what was
okay, that's an understatement. But anyway, go ahead. Oh my,
this?
what did you do? You run back upstairs or?
No, because this, I looked around in the dark basement, and it had, they have those real thin windows up towards the top where,
Yes.
and I think it was a full moon, so there was still, and I saw multiple portals for the first time in years since
What?
those couple weeks that I had drowned. And what was crazy was I was watching this portal, and I saw figures, about 5 or 6 of them, come out of the portals. And they were going about their business as if I had gone into their world accidentally.
Okay.
And it seems like they were just whatever they do every day, or it was
Right.
weird. And I had a sense, even at that age, I'm pretty sure I was 9, that it almost felt like I went into the wrong.
Right.
And I'm not sure how to.
Right,
how
right. In
quite
other
to
words, you went there instead of them coming over here to this plane that you were on.
That's what it seemed like.
Yeah.
Suddenly, one of them noticed me, turned, and they all turned. And they were, and I got grabbed by one and pushed up against the cinder block wall. It grabbed me by the throat, and I could feel it crushing me.
And were these like shadow people like the other one, or did they have more regular features, I guess?
Yeah, they had more regular features, and they were tall.
Okay.
And suddenly there was like this brilliant burst of red light, and it came flying across a wave of fire. It wasn't fire, but it seemed that's like the closest thing that I can explain.
Okay.
And they turned and looked at it, and it just consumed us all, and they were gone. And I didn't feel any heat or anything. It was just this brilliant, like the deepest red I've ever seen. And then suddenly I was by myself in the basement, and the basement light and everything was on. I grabbed what I needed to grab and just went flying up the stairs. And I did not.
You and this had been years then since you had seen the portals, right?
Right. The last time was when I was 1.5 years old.
Okay. God.
So then I didn't have anything else until I was 15 in El Paso.
So you went then through a few years where everything was, I'm sure you must have thought, thank God, I'm not having to.
Exactly.
And what happened? What do you think? I mean, besides the fact that you were an adolescent, was there a trigger that you think that what happened? You started seeing things again?
Yeah. I saw it that time, and then I didn't see any till I was 15, and I ran into that evil pan for the last time. And then I didn't have, on occasion I would see a portal just form, but it was just black. It looked like dark matter. I don't know how to explain it, like it was almost alive. But just darkness, and whatever it was in front of you couldn't see anything behind it. And it was irregular shapes. It was never oval or anything like that.
And did you always see it at your house, or did you ever see it in just any place that you went to?
So it was. I rarely saw them at my house. I would see them in just the strangest places. Sometimes when out in the desert. It seemed a lot of the times to be out in the desert.
Really? That's see, and you think about it. Usually in the desert, it's like not that many people have lived out there. That's interesting. And imagine as, oh my God, you must have been so brave by the time you were an adolescent, considering what you had gone through as a kid. Did your sister ever have her own experiences, or because it almost sounds like you were the target of everything?
She never saw anything.
Wow.
Even when I was in Arizona, she just doesn't remember anything.
Okay. Yeah, you were the target.
And then there was just that one incident with my parents.
Wow. But it sounds like something that they couldn't forget no matter what.
Oh no, definitely not.
So fast forward, here you are, you're an adolescent, and then what happens as you become an adult? Did you get like a rest period again, or what happened?
Portals now and then, and nothing paranormal until I was a police officer.
Okay.
And this is in the book too, because it was just an incredibly weird experience. It was my rookie year, and I was with my partner, and we were in El Paso. We had gone to this house multiple times on a domestic violence call. The husband and the wife, and they had 3 or 4 children. They were always fighting, and it was never physical, but when we were there, I mean, they were just screaming at one another all the time and cussing, and the kids were crying. He had never hit her, she never hit him, so we never
like
took
as
them
far
to
as having
jail.
to arrest anybody, I take it.
Correct. But my partner was pretty fed up at that time, and he told the husband, he said that from the house down here, he wanted everybody to sit in the living room on the sofa, and what we were going to tell them is that this crap has to stop. If we're coming back out next time, we're arresting both of them and he had the husband and the wife. They were sitting on the couch, and I believe it was 3 kids. It was sitting on the couch, and one was sitting on a recliner. And my partner was talking to him, and I was about 12 to 15 feet back, closer towards the front door and the stairs that go up. When you turn to the left, there was stairs that went upstairs from the front door. And so he's talking to them, and I could see him from where I was, person in the recliner, but I couldn't see the kids or I think it was the mom. And all of a sudden, everybody in the house started hearing somebody to tell us to go F off. And then it was from upstairs. And then we started hearing a lot of people yell, get the F out. It was crazy.
You guys must have been like, who are they hiding up there?
Well, exactly. So my partner started yelling at the father. He said, "I told you I wanted everybody down here now." And he told him, he goes, "I am sick of that's happening. I'm sick and tired of coming here." And the father had tears in his eyes, and I couldn't see what the mom or the kids were doing, but the father had tears coming down his eyes, and he was trembling, and he told my partner, "We are all here." He goes, "We're having issues in the house, and I can't explain it." He goes, "But we're all down here. There's no one else in the house." And I'm looking upstairs, and I just hear different voices yelling and screaming at
what was it,
my
like men and
partner
women all together?
It was so many voices.
Wow.
It was hard to tell who was yelling and screaming. It was just so many. And I told my partner, I said, "I'll go up." And the father said, "We're here."
I'll stay down here with them.
Yeah. So I had my mag light at that time, 90s. It was 1994, I believe.
So because of what? It was dark upstairs?
It was dark upstairs, correct.
Oy.
And I went up probably about 12, 13, 14 steps, and on both sides of the, remember the 80s style old laminated wood walls
Yes.
where it looked like all the little ovals in it, like
Uh-huh.
the tree trunks and all that.
Yes, yes, yes.
So I get to the top and I enter the hallway, and at this, there are hundreds of people yelling and screaming at me upstairs. And I have my mag light on. I don't see anyone in the hall, but I turn to the left and then to the right because I see movement on the walls. Well, when I flash my light, all I can see are thousands of faces that had formed in the walls, and they were following and screaming and yelling and telling my partner and I to get the F out of here. We don't belong here. And
and this is the thing. From what you're describing, everybody there was hearing this.
In this, including my partner.
Right. I mean, it wasn't like I'm the only one hearing it. Everybody's looking at you saying, "What are you talking about?" Everybody was hearing this.
Right.
Wow.
And my partner was calling out to me, but I was still taking in what was happening.
Uh-huh.
And apparently, he must have called out several times, or he called in for backup.
Sure.
And I didn't hear that because the screaming was so loud where I was, I couldn't hear my radio. And he, thinking that something was wrong with me.
Sure.
And finally, I yelled down to him, and I called him by his name, and then I told him, "Hey, you won't believe what's going on. You got to come up here right away." And the father says, "We won't move. We'll stay here." He goes, "We've been having issues," and I could barely make out what they were talking because it was so loud. Walking from the living room to the stairs, and then suddenly everything stops except for one voice, and I could see this one face at the end of the left side of the wall paneling looking at me.
Oh.
And he tells me, he goes, "You guys aren't effing supposed." Yeah, you weren't meant to be here anymore. And at that time I didn't kind of put two and two together, as or think about that, but my partner comes up the staircase and he sees the moving in the wall, but it's silent now.
Right.
And he doesn't know what to do. He was Catholic. He started kind of he started kind of like freaking. He was like, what is this? What's going on? And 2 or 3 officers at that point come through the door downstairs, and they call him by his last name. "What's going on? What's wrong?" And he looks, and I look, and back to normal laminated wood, and there's nothing. And so we told them, "Hey, we thought there were other people in the house."
Yeah,
but,
quick. I can imagine.
We searched.
It's like, how do you explain this?
Exactly. How do you explain it? But so they left, and we talked to the family, and we told them, "Hey, you got to go get help," and all that. But that was another paranormal incident that I had.
Had they had that experience prior to that moment?
Had a lot of weird things happening, but they never had
Not like that.
Yeah, not like that. And it had never communicated with anyone else outside of their family.
Okay, so they had something was going on that was going on that they was communicating, but they didn't have like the cast of thousands. It sounds like, and obviously it sounds like they were aware of you guys.
Correct.
Wow! Oh my God! Did you guys ever get a call back to go back to that house again?
No, we didn't.
I bet.
But later on in life, I had talked to people about what had happened. Even when I first started writing Dark Shadows and Catastrophe, I started it in the late 1990s.
Mm-hmm.
And I stopped. Well, there was an incident, the reason why I stopped, but stopped doing it because I was still in law enforcement in California then. And I didn't know. I was afraid to tell people and anything about
with good reason, yeah.
And I was embarrassed too, especially in law enforcement. I mean, that would have ended my career.
Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. Whether it was official or not, yeah, you're absolutely right.
Oh, definitely. But years later, from what that thing told, it was telling me, or I feel that this time in place, that it was telling me I wasn't supposed to be alive, or be here anymore.
Right.
Somehow, I'm where I'm not supposed to be.
Okay. Right, because
But
that's what I took. I would have taken it as like this thing, somehow or others, aware that when I was a child, I had a near-death experience and I was resuscitated. God.
yeah, it took me years though to go back and think about the people, and I think that's what it was telling me, and I just didn't get it until later on.
So I get it. It almost sounds like you had to make a choice: either write a book or I stay in law enforcement.
Right. Well, what happened here was what happened to the book. So I had written 5 chapters.
Okay.
It was 1997 or 98, and I was living in an apartment, and at that point I was on chapter 5, and I was like, I'm just going to do this. I'm going to finish it.
Right.
And a lot of stuff started happening. Doors were slamming, things were being left open, and then suddenly my 5 chapters were gone. I could never find where the book went.
What do you mean they were gone? It was gone.
It was gone. My 5 chapters are gone. I've had to rewrite everything.
What?
Yeah, just
No.
the apartment. So I didn't do anything for years until I think I started writing the book, and I decided to do it fiction
Right.
in 2016.
So it almost seems like they were keeping tabs on you.
Oh yeah.
So okay, so it almost sounds like you almost went like through almost like 20 years between those 5 chapters and when you actually wrote it. So what happened? You stayed in law enforcement. Did you have any more experiences? What happened in that interim?
Uh, I had, minor things. I went from law enforcement, I went into loss prevention. As a matter of fact, my newest book came out today, and it's called The Chronic. And it's fictional, but some of the stories in there are real.
What's the title on it again?
The Chronicles of Loss Prevention.
Of loss prevention. Well, congratulations.
Oh, thank
Okay,
you.
so and this is great because those are the books that even though they're fiction, they're based on you understand very very well the reality of the book. That usually translates very well when people write like that.
Right, and the run-ins, like this was an old building that the mall ended up being built around,
Okay.
and there was shelters that had been closed off and lost to time, and
Okay.
found until they decided to build a men's store next door to it, and when they knocked out the wall and found it, weird things started happening.
Wow.
I started
Whoa.
seeing apparitions. I wasn't the only one that saw them. But I think I don't know if I've been opened up to, I don't know, it almost feels like different planes of existence or something.
But you know what?
It's easier for me
I
to
can
say.
totally understand it. But here you had a couple of episodes where it was like that. Whether they understood, other people witnessed it, other people heard it, saw it,
Oh, yeah.
and I wonder if you're an amplifier. If you like, it's there all the time, but when you're in the vicinity, it kind of like turns up the volume or the visibility.
Oh, yeah. Like when, from that time at when I was working loss prevention, I had a room named Store, and we went back to the apartment one day,
Okay.
and the lady next door to us, she was elderly and she had passed away, and we were pretty decent friends with her. When we came home a few times, we came home together, and in the kitchen, all the doors and all the drawers and everything were constantly being left open all at the same time.
Oh.
And it really freaked my roommate out. And for me, it wasn't a big deal.
Yeah, but it's like,
But
that's nothing.
yeah, but so they were just minor experiences at that time.
Okay.
What was interesting was the day that I decided to start like an outline of Dark Shadows. I pulled out paper to start putting ideas down, and the moment I put the pen to the paper, it was an old house that we lived at down the street. We had all the doors in the house had those big rubber stop,
Yeah,
you know, where you can absolutely not pull those doors over those stoppers when there's carpeting as well. You can't do it.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
And the moment I said, okay, I'm going to write this book, and I started the outline, every door in the house, and with such force that they went over all the door stops, and the room that I was in writing was my office. At this time, I worked from home, and it had actually cracked the door about 3 or 4 inches upward from where the door stopped. But
okay. Well, obviously you wrote the book, but James, you must have been like, you know what? I may not feel or hear them, but they're aware of what I'm doing.
Oh, I definitely. I mean, there's so much more too that it is a constant. But for me, it's not a big deal, and it doesn't matter anymore. But for like my spouse now, she doesn't want to know anything.
Ignorance is bliss,
the couple
right?
run-ins that she's had have freaked her out, and she just got it.
And you know what I think is, and this is, I don't know, this is just theories that I've heard, that usually when you have something like that, like what you described, that requires so much force, okay? In other words, this is not like something that just fell over. This required so much force that usually that's an indicator that the entity or plural entities are not human, because they say because of the vast amount of energy it takes to do that. And I've never proved that theory one way or the other, but it sounds very plausible. Because you know how much force it would take to do that to those doors like that?
Yeah, there's no way that do it without. I mean, it would take a couple people to pull it, and they would break the door. I mean, the door would break in half.
Exactly. It's something that that is like, and like you said, there's no way to mistake this for something else. You know, sometimes certain things happen and people go, well, maybe it could have been caused by this or that. Like, how could you mistake this for what it was?
Yeah, no, there were 6 doors all at the same time, and nothing else moved. Nothing happened to glass dishes that were down in the kitchen. There was no earthquake. Nothing.
Well, even an earthquake is like. Did you ever have any experiences where people either took pictures or video of you where any anomaly showed up around you?
Not that I know of.
Okay.
No.
Okay. Because I know sometimes that happens. People aren't aware, but then they'll, somebody takes a picture and, they have either some strange anomaly or shadow or something around that person. And your parents, your sister, you said, everybody, they just had like that one. It was almost because they were in your vicinity, it seems like, that they had those experiences.
Yeah, I think the one as a police officer manifested because of that family, just all the negativity, but just because of what I've been through, I tend to be step into those realms is
right.
I guess the way to explain it. And so that was where the interaction came in that sense. But yeah, I agree. I think it's, like my wife says, or what she's gone through, she doesn't want to have happen again.
I can imagine. But you know what? At the same time, it's like I hate to say it, but I think it's going to be something that's going to occur to you on and off, I think, through the rest of your life. Because just something about
Oh
you,
yeah.
you know.
Well, it's crazy because not a whole lot has happened recently, but I was, for the first time in, I think it was April or May of this year, I went up north to Sedona,
Mm-hmm.
Arizona, for the first time ever.
Okay.
And the moment I drove into that town, I got so nauseated that I had to pull over because I couldn't drive anymore.
Really?
And the whole time I was in there, in that town, I felt like, and as I was in there, the longer, not one or two portals like I was used to seeing, but I saw hundreds of these dark matter form all over in Sedona.
You know what?
Uh,
And I wouldn't be surprised because, you know what? I know Sedona has this reputation for being, a lot of people is like the very peaceful and, spiritual, you know, place where you go, you have a spiritual retreats. But I think also that up there you have a lot of people sometimes dabbling in things with good or bad intentions, or let's say good, but ignorant intentions. And I think that sometimes they do stuff and they leave. Maybe they go there for a retreat or they do something and then they leave. And I'm not surprised at what you're saying.
yeah, as bad anywhere as I have there, and I do a lot of traveling, and I go into a lot of strange places, to photo and document stuff.
What was the
And
perimeter
never,
of area that once you started, was it going into the town or was it once you were in the middle of it? When was it that you started feeling really bad?
when I drove in from Clarkdale, Cottonwood side,
Mm-hmm.
and I was okay on the main street, but probably about a mile or two in, I started having that, my GPS was wrong. It sent me to the wrong location, and it took me all down into the back. And when I got up against the mountains,
Uh-huh.
I felt, that was where I felt like I had to pull over because I thought I was gonna, be vomiting. And I had to constantly stop because I couldn't continue to drive. And as I looked up in the mountains, those portals were just everywhere, and they wouldn't stop.
Have you
Or they would.
have you researched if anybody else has had a similar experience like that when going to Sedona?
I have not.
Because I have a feeling that I don't know why, but probably other people have had that. And like I said, because it's just I think there's
Yeah.
a concentration of spiritual energies there, and sometimes you have spiritual turbulence, and I can see
Well,
where
yeah,
some
they
people think
said,
it's great, but others probably have had a similar experience like yours.
right. I thought it was supposed to be this great place, and I've never felt so bad. And I just,
Wow, what an eye opener that is. That's very interesting. Very interesting. Because again, I've heard similar stories to other places where a lot of people congregate with, I want to say spirituality slash trying to reach out and maybe do spirit communication, things along those lines. And sometimes those places, they become, I don't want to use the word polluted, but it's the most appropriate one, which is stuff that's called in and left there. And then I think somebody like yourself, which is very sensitive, comes in and it's like, yeah, it's probably great for some people, but not for me. And now I'm thinking, wow, thank God that that you seem to have taken all of these experiences in stride, especially into adulthood. Have you ever had an experience with maybe any of these entities or whatever it is that's positive in the sense of either protecting you or communicating you with you or warning you of something?
I don't know. They've always seemed pretty negative.
Oh my God.
Um,
I'm trying to save this. It's like a, because and the only reason why I'm asking you is because when you said you had that you said you went down to the basement and you saw all these entities, and once they saw you they were like uh they had attacked you, and that you had that red light that basically like freed you. And I was thinking, man, I wonder if this was, I mean, the spiritual cavalry in the sense of who was that rescued you?
yeah, I don't even know how to explain what it was. It was just the brightest red flash that I've ever come across, and the way that like a wave.
Wow. And whatever it was, it just totally stopped everything in its tracks.
Yeah, it almost seemed like it realigned me or put me back where I was supposed to be.
And have you had any how about in dream time, James? Have you had any experiences? Okay.
That's what 10/22/2036 is about.
Oh, really?
That's a
Okay.
date.
And what is, in other words, it's fiction, but like your first one, fiction based on nonfiction.
Right. When I don't have any ability when I'm awake.
Right.
But sometimes when I dream, I see things and
Okay.
they happen.
Okay.
It's not always accurate, but I'd say maybe 7 or 8 out of 10 times it is. And
That's pretty high
right
odds.
now, I keep having a reoccurring dream. Probably for the last 8 to 10 years.
Okay.
Well, no, that's maybe about the last 6 to 8 years, about the October 22nd, 2036. And I keep seeing something bad happening to the entire planet.
Wow.
But the dream. And so what I did in the book was I finished it myself with what I thought might be occurring in my dream,
Okay.
but I've never been able to finish it. I always get a certain point, and for some reason I wake up or I'm awoke, thing happening. And not paranormal or supernatural, but
Right.
somebody waking me up or hearing something.
Okay.
And I haven't had that dream in a few months,
Okay.
but there was a point probably a year or two ago where I was having it maybe every other night. But before that, I'll have like little things like my niece had a baby and earlier than what she was supposed to, and I woke up and I told my wife, hey, she just had the kid, and she was like, just go back to bed. And her sister called her in the morning and said, hey, she had the baby at this time, and my wife was like, that was the exact time I woke her.
Wow.
So but then it manifested into this October 22nd, 2036, and I've
And is
continued.
let me ask, and I know what you're saying that you never see, is it like, is it a man-made cataclysm, or is it something, let's say like a meteor, like, hey, it wasn't our fault, but how do we, we can't get out of the way. How does it, do you have
Right.
any idea?
It's more that it's not
Okay.
man-made.
All right.
And it's something that has happened and it continues to happen. We've just lost knowledge of it in the past, and it happens at regular intervals when we're in a certain location that our galaxy travels through, or our solar system travels through in the galaxy.
So in other words,
So
it's
I
like
go into
something I
as
want.
much.
And the reason why I say this is that I remember when Well, you were around. You know when we were coming up to the year 2000 that they made a bunch of these end of the world kind of movies because of course the year 2000 was going to be it. And I remember what was it? Which was it? I can't remember the title of it. But the one where they had something like that, a meteor coming towards the Earth, and I know that there's been theories that the extinction of the dinosaurs was caused. Well, I want to say no, it's not a theory. I believe they are sure that that's what happened, and that's what caused the climate change, etc. So it's a very feasible, but a desirable possibility.
Yeah, and that's along the line of what happens, and that was kind of what I'm trying to pass on in that book. And I ended it in what I believe may be the potential outcome of my dream.
And okay, and
But remember too that I've built a story around it, and I've turned it into fiction
sure,
and added more to. I always tell people, 40-50% of the first book was real, and this one is just a lot of story, but that date is the important
based on
factor.
that. And James, have you ever had any feelings or presentiments of anybody dying? Something along the lines of what you described, where your niece had the baby, like out of sleep, because I know that happens to a lot of people. It's almost like when they fall asleep that their minds rests when they get those messages.
Well, and I think it's catastrophe that's going to end up causing a lot of people to not be here, and I'm just not sure how it ends.
Right, and I know that in some cases, I know that what they call the Cassandra effect, which is where people that are sensitive or psychic, whatever you want to call them, for some reason they tune in sometimes, and it seems it's like always horrible or bad premonitions. In other words, that's as a matter of fact, I've heard that a lot of psychics or people that are sensitive, that's why they turn away, like they want to shut it down. It's like I don't want to know about this anymore.
Exactly.
Yeah. That is so. And when would you say was the last time that you had any encounter with anything?
Oh gosh, it was probably in May of this year.
Oh, okay. And what happened?
But it was just seeing a shadow figure.
And that was. And were you the only one that saw it, or did your wife see it as well?
No, this one came out of a portal out in the middle of the desert.
Oh, that's gotta be so disturbing. That you're going out someplace where you think there's nothing out here. And then you
Exactly.
see something like that.
And during the daytime.
Of all things, during the daytime. And I mean, I don't mean to be dramatic, but it always sounds like this is like the portal to hell. And by this, I mean, it sounds almost like what you're describing is whatever comes through there is dark. It's not like, oh, wandering spirits, it sounds like they're very dark, whatever's coming in and out through those portals.
Yeah, after I always, sometimes I tend to think that having had that near-death experience, I crossed into maybe a higher, and that gave me a tie to that same.
Yes, absolutely.
So I don't know if they're all bad or just some of them. It always seemed to be just, the one. It was that group of them. It was just one that grabbed me while the rest just watched.
But still,
and it was like they weren't even aware of me until I made a sound too close to them.
right. And you know what? I've heard of that description before, and based on what you're telling me, these sound a little bit like earthbound discarnates. These are not like, people that have died and they ascended, and no, these sounds like what
Right.
you're describing
It
sound
seemed like
like
they were going
earthbound
about their business.
discarnates. I'm sorry, what?
It seemed like they were going about their business
Right,
wherever
right,
they
but
were.
in other words, they're still, and I know exactly what you mean. Like they're almost doing whatever they're doing. Like like when somebody's caught up doing something and they're just blind, they got blinders on, they're just doing whatever it is that they're doing. But
Exactly.
I want to say that what you're describing is almost like a dead person that has not ascended. In other words, they might be earthbound or in that in between place for whatever reason. God, it could be anything. They don't know they're dead. They're scared of moving on, thinking, I'm gonna go to a hot place. Things that human beings do when they have this self-awareness, or and but yeah, I have a feeling that somehow or other that NDE gave you like an extra connection to the other side, that in between place, or what they call the middle plateau. That was one of the references that I've heard, which is that area that's not our plane, but in between, let's say, for lack of a better word, heaven. In other words, like, and I don't want to use the real heavy Catholic term, but like purgatory, but not really in the sense of like purgatory, like punishment. It's almost like an in between place. You're not in one part or the other, but you still have that self awareness as a human being, if that's what you were at one point. Because from what I understand, in that middle plateau, you have the existence of non-human entities as well. So, wow. Let me tell you something. You should have stayed in law enforcement. You wouldn't have been scared of anybody. Going through that as a kid, I'd be like, oh, I can handle anything.
Right. No, that's not much throws me for a loop.
Let me ask you, how about your wife? I know that you said that what experiences did she have? If you could describe them, was it when you were around? I take it.
She's asked me not to.
Okay, don't worry about
talk
it.
about
We won't
it.
talk
So.
about it then. But enough said that it sounds like she had a real. I guess what I'm saying is, I imagine that if you meet somebody and they tell you, let's say maybe like what you told her, I imagine is when you were getting to know each other, this happened to me, these are my experiences. And maybe even if you believe that person, I think that there's got to be that moment when you have your own experience that you're like, something like what happened with your parents when their bed shook, like, oh my God, this is real.
Right. Now do you believe me?
Exactly, now you believe me. Absolutely. That is right. So today you had your first book. I'm going to ask you, do you have, and by the way, that thing that you had when you did the first book, that's never happened again when you started any of your other books?
No, it hasn't.
It was that one first book. Would you say that first book was the one that was most aligned with the truth of your real experiences? And I know you said you.
Oh.
Okay.
Yeah, because I mean, it had started out, it was going to be an autobiography.
Right. Let me ask you, James, do you think, I know it sounds like, do you think that considering that they stole your manuscript, do you think that the idea behind it was not for you to write or put that out because they don't want people to know about them? I know it sounds like really, but I can't understand any other reason why.
Yeah, it's possible. I also always, they just love to terrorize, and maybe that was what they were hoping would be the outcome.
Right. Yeah. And
that's possible.
Do you get the feeling, and I know that I've heard of this sometimes in connection with shadow people, where that they're either around when bad things are going to happen, or when bad things are happening, and it's almost like sometimes the theories that they feed off of, like what you described, negative energy, fear, or what was going on in that household where the adults were fighting, and like that's for them is like what they feed off of. And do you think that is part of whatever it was, that especially that evil pan thing? That's I think I have nightmares about that. that's why it would come around and terrorize you, because it was feeding off that terror that you experienced.
I almost, yeah. I mean, I don't see what other reason it would have. It got pure pleasure from doing what it did, and then the other. It almost seems like I've come across three different shadow figures in my lifetime. That really just evil one, and then the other ones almost seem like an out of place, out of time.
Mm-hmm.
Like I didn't belong, and then the other ones just come in and out of, and I don't know what they're doing, but no contact with those ones.
Right. But let me tell you, I think the most disturbing of everything that you described is those portals that you see in the most
Yeah,
unexpected
they're
places.
bizarre, and
So,
it's like just like this thick, dark black matter.
that's very disturbing. But you know what? I just think that you have the ability to see something, it sounds like, without that's just there, but the majority of us just can't see it. We don't see it, but it's there. And you just have that ability to see it. Hmm. Well, let me. And are you planning your next book, or am I getting ahead of myself, considering you just had one issue today?
Yeah, well, I think my next one is going to be non
Okay.
anomalies in the desert Southwest. A lot of petroglyphs and pictographs and things that show, things that shouldn't be there, or in the past that shouldn't have been around.
Right. You know what? It's really funny that now that you mentioned that, this week I read that they discovered hundreds and well, they think maybe possibly in the thousands of pictographs and glyphs in India, and I want to say, is it the northern India, like where they think the beginning of the Indus Valley started, and it's incredible. You know how those paintings that they have in those caves, like in France and Spain, where it shows where they would do like the bison or whatever animals, and it's
Right.
incredible some of the glyphs that they just discovered over there that have been there. They said some of the villagers, because apparently this is a really remote area of India. A few villagers in the area were aware of it, had been aware of it for hundreds of years, but most of them have been overlooked. And they're saying they date it back at least to about 10,000 years ago. Yeah. Well, 10,000 BC. In other words, it's going to be 12,000 years, but way, way back.
Oh yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'm convinced that we have lost history.
Mm-hmm. Yes, exactly.
Things a lot older, and I think that there's this reoccurrence that has caused major catastrophes to
Yes.
happen and wipe out a lot of people that weren't underground, and that's why these large underground structures and that have housed 80 to 250,000 people.
Yes. And
How do you build something like that unless those people had to live there for 100, 200, 300 years?
Of course. And what they were saying is that based on the glyphs, they say that whoever was there, they were hunter gatherers. There was no. They say they don't show any type of depiction of agriculture as we normally would see it. Everything has to do with either hunting or animals, or the animals of that time period. So, which against, this we always think of civilization starting, when people basically became agricultural and grew wheat or whatever, and then they built cities. But I agree with you. I think that there's a lot of much earlier civilizations that predate that.
Oh yeah.
Wow.
And I think a lot of it's out here in the southwest, in the desert southwest, in the Sonoran Desert.
And I know that I think I know what everybody else has heard about the Anasazi, and that that they've never kind of had a really good explanation as to why they abandoned that area that they lived at, or what happened to them, etc. And I'm sure that like that there's other stories or other things that maybe have yet to be discovered. That's just one that's just received more coverage, I guess.
Right, I'm in agreement.
Well, James, it has been absolutely wonderful to speak to you. Do you have a website that people could either purchase the books from, or where could they go to get your books?
Sure, they're for sale on Amazon and also at Barnes and Noble online.
Okay.
And I do have a Amazon that I try to put up some of the new findings that I have, and all my books are there, and it'll take you right to them for sale where they're at.
Okay, so if anybody, they can just go, exactly right. You have an author's page on Amazon.
Correct.
Perfect, perfect. James, it's been great to talk to you. I'm telling you, that story that you said, as I can't imagine. Um, you must have nerves of steel. I guess that's the only thing I can say. You must have nerves of steel.
Not much scares me anymore.
I
maybe
bet.
maybe people.
It's like, okay, hey, go down to that dark room. It's like, sure, whatever. I don't care. It's like, when people just become desensitized totally. I'm telling you, you must be considering what you've gone through since you were a child. Uh, that's incredible. But it was a fascinating story, and I want to wish you the best of luck on the new book and any upcoming ones, and hopefully
Thank
you'll
you.
come back and we can talk about those. And again, thank you so very much for joining us tonight.
Oh, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye.
So, guys, you think I'm kidding? That man, nothing. I mean, you know how people, they hear a loud noise and they'll jump. He must be like, and nothing phases him. Nothing. I wouldn't. After that, I'd be like, nope. Loud noises, dark. I'd be like, okay. Because, and it makes you wonder, was what happened? I mean, I even thought about it, and I'm thinking, I didn't ask him because I'm thinking he wouldn't know. I mean, because when he had this accident, he was just a baby, a year and a half, that's a baby. And I'm thinking, I wonder if this dark shadow or whatever, that evil pan, for the love of Mike, if that evil pan was there before, and maybe this is what caused him to have that accident where he almost died. And luckily he was resuscitated, but I wonder if that thing was, I mean, I know accidents happen, it has nothing to do with things, but it makes me wonder if that thing was around, and maybe perhaps, obviously he was targeted. I mean, it sounds like the rest of his family had compared to him, a very slim brush with this, but absolutely, it makes you wonder, was he the target, or was he the target because now his ability was, like, I don't want to say amplified. And I mean, you hear the theory that children, in and of themselves, because they don't have that filter yet in their mind that they usually get when you're about 7 or 8 years of age, are more accepting, and they just see and recognize a lot of things from the paranormal. But can you imagine, you're a kid and then you've had a near-death experience, so you must be to the nth power. But God, considering how dark those experiences were, I wonder if he still leaves the closet door open. I don't think he would have appreciated it if I asked him that. It'd be like, huh? But let me tell you, that definitely, especially his first book that he said is a thinly veiled, fictionalized, real autobiography. And yeah, and I understand totally when he described, like, hey, I had to make a choice, either besides the fact that his manuscript disappeared, stay in law enforcement or write a book. But you know what? We make choices, and I still think that there was something. How can I say, something in the background that it was like, we can't let this person describe how common portals are. How's that? We can't, if people, if the living realize that these portals can just basically open up anywhere. Wow. Because, a lot of people think of portals as either being conjured or opened by somebody with that intent, or somebody doesn't know what they're doing, or, you know, I mean, but in other words, it's a manufactured event. But what if they're not? What if portals can open at the behest of the dead on the other side? What? So much for that haunted house theory. It's like any place you go, there they are. Very interesting. But anyway, guys, again, I'm back to what I had promised you before, which is that I would look at the questions that I get, and I kind of like look at it and say, okay, this is a question that a bunch of people have asked, and I had a few, and I was like, well, let's see, what do people want to know about as far as common with the supernatural. One of the things that I think that a lot of people want to know about is when it comes to protection. And by this I mean, there's a lot of people has told me, well, you know what, I've thought of doing that, but sometimes I get scared because I'm thinking, what if something follows me home? What if something attaches to me? What if I come across a dark entity? But I'm really fascinated, and I look at all the ghost shows and I read all the books, but God, I'm just scared. I'm afraid of worst case scenario. And the truth is this: if you want to do it, it's not, first of all, reality TV is heightened because, of course, it's got to draw in and keep its audience. But in truth, you will run across a lot of cases, number one, that are duds. By this I mean there's nothing really supernatural going on. Okay, you might have something going on in the household. You sometimes run across individuals that they're attention seekers, or even sometimes that have something, if not out and out mental illness, it's just something that's not right with them, and they are convinced that what's going on is supernatural, and it's not. Okay, and every once in a while you run across some like that. And there's others that you go and there isn't anything, but there just isn't. It's just natural occurrences. The wind, something that's loose, pipes. Sometimes people don't realize that they've got an animal that's gotten in between a wall or upstairs, pigeons. It could be a host of things that could be making a weird noise at certain times. All right. And again, because of the reality shows, everybody jumps to the conclusion, oh, it's supernatural, it's a ghost, whatever. Okay. Again, and this is the thing, as a paranormal team, what I'm saying is you will go to a certain amount of these investigations that turn out to be duds. You go there, you set up equipment, and nothing ever happens. And then after a while, when you start looking at what's there and what's not there, you realize there's nothing supernatural. And, you kind of fall asleep a little bit, and then, of course, you run into the ones where you do have something going on. The family is describing something that, in other words, that they got their head pretty well straight on, and they start describing things, and then, your team starts finding stuff that shows there's some type of anomaly. Sometimes it's just a regular dead person. In other words, by this I mean it's not dark. It's not a non-human entity. In other words, that's not that common. And you're going to have the people that are very excited, and basically they're calling in a team, and you'd be surprised, maybe they've called in other teams. Just really what they're trying to do is find out how many ghosts and who are the ghosts, and don't shoo them out. And I've talked on other shows about that. I don't think it's a good idea, but forget that. And basically they just, or they want you to confirm what another team said. Okay? And that's it. You're really not asked to do anything except work it. And then you get the other ones that will tell you, oh my God, yeah, nah, thanks for letting me know I'm not crazy. Now what do? I don't want that thing in my house. Ah. You know? And, you could do a blessing for them, especially if you're really determined that. And a lot of times when you question people, you find out when was the origin of this? What was a triggering event? Like I said, sometimes you find out, hey, it's not the place, it's a person. Somebody will fess up along the way that maybe they've had experiences for many years on and off. Okay? Or the death of sometimes family, friends. And it's really weird because sometimes everybody thinks that, when you can start getting these manifestations, it has to be somebody close, like as a family or a very close friend. And sometimes it's not. You'd be surprised. Sometimes you will get a person that died that was maybe a friend of the family's that you think, well, why is this person? And a lot of times maybe that points to that there is somebody in that family or living there that has got some type of sensitivity. And that spirit is trying to get to somebody. In other words, there's something holding them back. Whether it's acknowledgement, whether it's because they got a message, because people die unexpectedly and they feel like they've left a lot of loose ends, and they just try to gravitate to somebody they know that might have the ability to either hear them or see them. Okay? And that's what I'm saying. Sometimes when you ask people, have you lost anybody that fits it? And they'll look at you and go, huh? No, my grandparents or my whatever. No. And then every once in a while, sometimes they'll come back and they'll tell you, hey, you know what? I just realized, or I spoke to somebody in my family, that this person either committed suicide or this person died or this, and that happened maybe a month or 2 months ago. And they'll be thinking, man, that's a real stretch. But I say sometimes the desire of a spirit to communicate with somebody doesn't necessarily mean that you were close to them in life. It just means that they're really desperate and you're about somebody here has got the ability, they think, to see them or hear them or something. And then every once in a while, then you're going to come across the dark ones. Okay? But to be perfectly honest with you, these are the least of the experiences that you're going to have. I guess my point is that if you want to get into doing it, I know that there's some teams also that they do the equivalent of a ride-along. In other words, you know how the police, you can do like a ride-along, where you can accompany them and see, because I think there's a lot of people that they see the shows, and then when the reality of it comes about, they're like let down, like this is it? This is boring. And sometimes, not all the times, but sometimes a lot of these investigations take place on the weekends because this is the time that the family's at home, or that nobody's working, or that they can actually let you into the house. You don't know how many times I've stepped in to help different teams that know me, because I've been around for so long, because their members, they didn't have manpower. Yeah, they have the members, but then when they try to put a team for the case, people beg out. Oh, I can't, I'm traveling, my sister's wedding, or I'm sick. Why? Because it's on a weekend, excuse me, or whatever. So a lot of people that get into it, they're very let down after they go out on a few of them because they think it's boring and, well, man, I thought I was going to see stuff fly across the room. Nothing like that. That's the thing. This work sometimes is very subtle, very subtle. If there is something there, okay. And then, it's the field work, and I've said this before, this is where you develop your skills as a paranormal investigator. Okay? So I would say fear is not a good reason not to do it. There should be a level of fear which should teach you to be cautious about certain things or about listening to your gut. But it shouldn't stop you from doing it if that's what you really like. Okay? Because the truth is you make a lot of good memories. There's a lot of laughs, especially if you're with a group that you gel, and everybody knows what they're doing, and you have some great times, because as professional, which you should always be professional, you can be very professional, But still, let's face it, some of the things that you run across, it's like they're hilarious, they're funny, and you're all there trying to capture that moment when you see, hear, whatever. Um, but like I said, I think it's for somebody that really, really is doing it for the right reason. It's super interesting work, and and I agree with a lot of the paranormal investigators that have been around for a while. You know what? All these gadgets and things that they have to measure and all this, that's great. But to be honest with you, some more of them are best used for show, like if you have a reality show. But when you come into the reality of when you're there somewhere doing an investigation, sometimes with limited space, depends on where you're doing it. Sometimes you can use the basics to capture evidence, and it works just as well because some of the equipment sometimes ends up becoming more of a distraction than actually helping with the investigation. So, despite all the recognition, if you want to call it that right now is surrounds like paranormal investigations and this and that, I think that it's still a very vital field for somebody that's really into it, is willing sometimes to maybe go out there on a weekend, uh, give up some of their free time and maybe go out on cases that are like boring, even if there's something there, or going and thinking, oh my God, this person's off their rocker. We gotta go. And sometimes you come across places that are really, really, really awful, yucky. Well, I would say the majority of places I went to, as far as when they were residentials, they were pretty good. I never went to some place that was like, oh crap, this is really scary, like this is dirty. But sometimes you do run across those things. But if you've got the true desire to see what you can capture, what you can experience, in other words, you're not in there for the sensationalism, I think definitely you should pursue it. You should pursue it, and don't get discouraged when you go to a lot of investigations that are boring or time consuming, or it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, because you're always going to have that eternal hope that you're going to come across that one case, which is the one where you capture some type of evidence. Plus, there's always the idea that you're helping somebody. And by this I mean, some people are legit, for all the ones that I say, hey, they're so excited they got a ghost and they want their names. You get another set of clients which are totally scared out of their minds about what's going on, and they just don't know what to do about it. And they don't know how to handle it, and they don't even have the prerogative. They can't move. It's like, hey, I can't financially or whatever. I don't want to. So here they are, and being able to help them, either because you do a blessing, or you explain what it is, or you put them in touch, if it's something very severe, with maybe somebody that does exorcism or house blessings, because really, if you go by Catholic rite, you can't exorcise a house. You can exorcise a person. They can do a blessing on the house, which is like kind of like the exorcism of the building, but you don't exorcise a house per se. And sometimes, I'm going to say, the most powerful thing that any person or family can do is to take back ownership and control of what's going on. Put a lot of happy music, watch a lot of happy shows, okay, and laugh the spirit away. Everybody's gonna go, oh, Marlene, yeah. A lot of people feed into with their fear and negativity, and sometimes dynamics that are going amongst the people in the house. They feed it fertilizer to whatever's there, and it's like, you can't do that. You cannot do that. Anyway, guys, next show I'm going to probably talk about, people were asking me about family curses. when families are cursed or they're hexed or they've got a spirit that follows the family around generation to generation. People have asked about that. I'll talk about that next time. But anyway, subscribe to the channel, or if you're listening to us on a podcast platform, if you're going see us on YouTube, remember I'm on iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Stitcher. I'm on all those podcast platforms. If you're a true believer, send me your story. I'm still getting a lot of fantastic stories. Go to miamighostchronicles.com. There's a submit your story tab, or you can send it to me at marlene@miamighostchronicles.com. Either way, again, I have a lot of super interesting shows. I've done a special little show that I put together for Halloween, which is all about ghost stories having to do with St. Augustine. But besides that, I have a lot of interesting guests coming up. And believe it or not, I'm already on the verge of starting to work on season 6. Season 6 of Stories of the Supernatural. Okay, that's how far in advance we've gotten with the show and what we're going to be doing, which the reason I'm bringing that up again is if you have suggestions on a topic that you would like to hear about discussed, if you have a guest that you heard that you would like this person to come back, or maybe you've heard this person on another show and would say, hey Marlene, can you bring that person because they have this new book, or I would like to really hear them, discuss things with them because their topic of whatever interest or their area of specialty is that, let me know. Let me know. I will make every effort to contact that person. What's the worst they can tell me? Nope. Oh, all right. Okay. So, but a lot of times, to be perfectly honest with you, I would say 80% of the people out there, whether they're authors or experts or just people, plain old people, they're very agreeable to coming on and talking about what everybody wants to talk about, which is the weird stuff, the paranormal stuff. So again, got a lot of fantastic shows, but I'm always open to new areas of show material, and of course something that's you, the audience, is going to want to listen to and talk about. Also, I'm not sure if this is going to air before that. I got to look at my dates, but now at the end of November I'm going to be on Vegas Supernatural with Reverend Sean Whittington. He was one of my guests, and great interview, and he's asked me to appear on his show, so I'll probably be posting that up once he lets me have the podcast once it's recorded. But that's gonna be a live show with Reverend Sean Whittington on Vegas Supernatural. So again, guys, take care, and thank you so very, very much for being part of my audience and spending this time with me. Take care.